Hello everyone and welcome to another GLC review. Today we're looking at Perfect Order that is just around the corner of releasing. So we will go through each type to look at the most interesting cards for GLC, and then we will look at all the trainers and energy, and lastly we will look at my tier list of the types for the format. Will we see some new contenders for S tier? Spoiler alert, no. Let's get started. Taking a look at how I rank these cards, typically a 5 means that you need to make cuts for this and is very strong in the meta. 4 are definite considerations for certain decks. 3 are solid cards, but there could be different options that are just a little bit better. 2 are cards that are just too situational, and 1 are cards that definitely cannot keep up in the meta. First up we have Superior, which is a stage 2, 160 HP and has 1 attack for 1 energy. Does 20 damage for each Pokemon you have in play. So normally this is doing 120 damage if you've got a max bench size, but you can boost this with things like Skyfield to get up to let me do some math, like 180 for 1 energy, which is pretty good, but filling your bench up that much is really difficult in GLC, and relying on a stadium for this can be easily countered or bumped. But it does have a second attack, Solar Winder, for 3 energy. It does 100 damage, but if you have Rose's Encouragement in your discard pile, this attack does 150 more. So 250 for 3 energy, and we'll see the synergy with Roses in a little bit. This attack is pretty good if you have that in your discard. There are consistent ways to get that into your discard even if you don't play it. So pretty decent attacker, but it is on a stage 2, so I don't know how well this is going to work, relying on that. Moving on. Vivillon is next, which is another stage 2 in grass, only 120 HP, so very fragile. But it has the ability Big Wings. Once during your turn, you may have your opponent shuffle their hand and put all of those cards on the bottom of their deck. Then your opponent draws 4 cards. This can be an extremely disruptive ability that you can pair with things like Xerosics, Machinations, Delinquent, and even lock your opponent out of supporters or items with things like Executor, Badoo, or Valplume. So I think this guy fits very well into a sort of control deck, disruption deck, and even has a serviceable attack where if you have a stadium in play, it does 120 for 1 energy, which is pretty good. So I think Vivillon is very solid. It also has its pre-evolutions that both have the same ability where you get to evolve them on the turn you play them, or on your first turn. So you can have Vivillon out as soon as your very first turn using this ability to disrupt your opponent's hand. Very, very good. I wanted to talk about this Talonflame for a second, even though we currently cannot play him as there is no Fire Fletchling, as it is not a fire type. But if we ever get the chance to play it, he could be pretty solid. He has the ability Sky Hunt, where once during your turn you may flip a coin. If heads, your opponent discards a random card from their hand. And I think this could fit specifically in a Fire Mill deck where you are discarding cards from their deck, but also getting rid of those resources in their hand at the same time. And you could discard some key recovery cards that your opponent would need to put cards back into their deck. So unfortunately we can't play him, but I think he would be pretty good in Fire Mill. Moving on to water types, first we have this Dugong, which has the washout ability. As often as you like, you may move a water energy from your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. And if this sounds familiar, it is the exact same ability, even the same name as the Quagsire that we have had for a while. And the combo goes, you attach with Frostmoth, and then Quagsire can move it from your bench to the active, and you don't have to rely on a stage 2. And this has been proven to be quite effective. Unfortunately, the Quagsire that we already had has a way better attack if it needs to do so than the Dugong. So, but the Dugong is still here mainly for its ability, and if you don't have the Quag, then using the Dugong would be probably just fine, but you definitely would just rather play the Quagsire over this. Aurorus is an interesting fossil Pokemon we've got for water that has the ability Tundra Wall. While this Pokemon is in play, all of your Pokemon that have a water energy attached take 50 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. It says this ability does not stack, but it's saying it doesn't stack with itself, meaning you can stack it with things like Pot Helmet or Lake Acuity to get your damage reduction up to 100. If you play the special Wailord, this could be 130 damage, which would completely mitigate some decks' damage. You could even further this by playing things like Malo and Lana if they start to rack up some damage, and you can keep your attackers going for a long time. I think Aurorus is very strong in a more tanky water build, and it even has a decent attack where for 3 energy it does 150, and during your opponent's next turn the defending Pokemon can't attack, which is quite strong if you need to use it. So overall, I think Aurorus is a very good addition to this archetype. Luxray is a new addition to the Lightning Pool, where it has a Onslaught attack for 2, and it does 70 damage times the amount of prize cards you have already taken. So taking 3 prize cards, this guy is hitting for 210 for 2, which is pretty good, and even has another attack for 3 where it does 200 flat, and you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. I think in most cases you would much rather play another Luxray that just puts itself into play and has a very serviceable attack. However, with this Luxray, it does make KOing things like Okidogi a lot easier because you don't need as many damage boosters. Between a Strong Bolt and an Electro Power, you can one-shot the Doge. So I think he does have his place. However, I think in most cases you would just rather play the other Luxray. We've got a new Aromatisse that has a very strong ability to consistently get energy into your hand. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for up to 2 basic Psychic Energy and put them into your hand. I think this is a very strong ability to pair with things like Xatu to consistently have that extra energy attachment, and especially with Galarian Articuno, where you can consistently keep attaching to this Articuno, and when it gets knocked out, play a bunch of recovery cards and loop the Articuno to continually snipe your opponent's support Pokemon until there are none left, leaving only their attackers that you can clean up with things like Iron Boulder Mewtwo and, you know, the million other attackers that Psychic has. I think the strat could be really fun, and just a solid ability to pair with things like Xatu. When making a good deck, you always have to ask the question, how do I deal with Wailord? And Probopass might be that answer for fighting. For 4 energy, you do 260 damage, but you have to discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. I think this is easier than we think to power up with things like Colossal, Garganacl, and the new Barbaracle. Barbaracly. Yeah, that's the one. To consistently power up the Probopass and swing to one-hit KO a whale. I think it's solid in an evolution-based fighting deck and could be good going forward. Looking at that new Barbaracly, we've got this ability, Stone Arms. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic fighting energy from your hand to one of your fighting Pokemon. So this is very strong acceleration for fighting. I believe this is one of, if not the only, stage 1 energy accelerator instead of just being on stage 2s. So it makes it a little bit more consistent. You're already wanting to have a ton of fighting energy in your hand because of Lunatone. So it already synergizes there, and I think he is especially good with things like Okidogi, where you can continuously recycle your Okidogi and just bring it back, attach an energy with this guy, another special energy, and you can just have back-to-back Okidogis with this thing if you build your deck around it. But besides that, I mean, like, accelerating to any fighting Pokemon is just going to be solid, and they have a lot of good attackers that have higher energy costs, but this makes it a lot easier to obtain those energy costs. So very, very solid mon. Tyrantrum is our other new fossil, where it is a stage 2, 180 HP, and has the ability Tyrannoguts. If this Pokemon has any special energy attached, it gets 150 more HP. You can combine this with the things like Luxurious Cape, and if my math is correct, that is going to be 430 HP on a single prize attacker, which in GLC is just absurd. Most things are not even two-shotting that. And then it has a really good attack too. Just 2 energy does 160. You flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, discard the top card of your opponent's deck. So not only are you hitting 160, which is totally great, and there are damage boosting things in fighting galore, but you're also discarding your opponent's resources. And this synergizes so well with Okidogi because you want to play special energy with both of them, and between the two of them, they can literally just carry your entire game with just these 2 attackers. I think he's going to be an extreme menace going forward for fighting. To round out the fighting cards, we have a new Hawlucha, which synergizes very well with an Earthquake type deck, where it has an attack for a single energy, does 30 damage, but if your bench Pokemon have any damage counters on them, it does 60 more. So it does 90 for 1, which is very good. You can boost these numbers with multiple things in fighting, and pairs very well with this sort of low to the ground, low maintenance attackers in fighting that all seem to synergize with hurting your own bench. So I think it is a solid addition to that archetype, even though that deck hasn't seen very much success lately, but still very fun. We have one metal Pokemon to talk about in Klefki, which has an attack for a single metal energy, does 30 damage, and it's a disable attack. So you choose an attack on your opponent's active Pokemon and they cannot use it next turn. We've seen this attack be successful on other cards like Sableye and Morpeko, and this does even more damage than those cards. So I think this is very good in as an opener for Metal, and can also be a stalling option against things like Wailord or Okidogi. So very, very good card. I think it'll be a great addition to all Metal decks. In colorless, we have a new Diggersby that does 140 damage for a single energy, but you have to do 30 damage to each of your own bench Pokemon. That is a little bit of a downside, but we could utilize some cards like Dodrio that actually wants damage on itself because it can do more damage that way. And we can even mitigate that damage with things like Picnic Basket to heal our Pokemon after using this attack. Colorless struggles with energy attachments sometimes, and having a low maintenance attack like this and hitting for 140 is very, very good. And you already have an extremely good Bunnelby that utilizes TMs that you can just evolve onto with this thing. So I think Diggersby is a very great addition to colorless. Moving into the trainer cards, we have Energy Swatter, which is an item that says your opponent reveals their hand and you choose an energy card you find there and put it on the bottom of your opponent's deck. This is a little bit disruptive. However, I think that playing cards like Enhanced or Crushing Hammer are just better, where you're discarding their energy from play rather than taking their energy and putting it back into the deck. Maybe in an extremely large control deck, you could fit this in to have even more energy disruption, but I think you would just rather play the hammers than the swatter. We'll talk about both the new fossils at the same time, where they have decent abilities like being unaffected by effects of supporters, or having a pseudo bench barrier in this ability. But it all depends on which stage 1 you want to play. There are certain Tyrants and the Aurora's Pokemon that have 90 HP that you can play with Unidentified Fossil, and that means you can search them with Level Ball. So I think it's just a little bit more consistent to play the Unidentified Fossil route instead of these, but still a solid option for those new fossil Pokemon. We have this Lumiose Gillette. This says it's an item that heals 20 damage and 1 special condition from your active Pokemon. I'd like to go on a little bit of a rant here to look at the base set potion that also removes 2 damage from your opponent, from your Pokemon. And 30 years later, where Pokemon's HP has more than tripled, we are still only healing 20 damage from your Pokemon with just that little addition of removing the special condition. Can we heal a little bit more, please? Anyways, I did find a couple uses for this thing with both the Snorlaxes, actually. With the normal Snorlax, you can actually just wake up from putting itself to sleep, so you don't have to rely on things like therapeutic energy with it, and can also be utilized on the Hop Snorlax to heal it just enough where Hop Snorlax can attack twice without knocking itself out. And those are played in the same deck, so this does have its use, I think, but still just a pretty underwhelming amount of healing for a card. So, moving on. Tarragon is a new supporter that is just Tulip or Nessa for fighting type, and so it is a straight up upgrade to Clara in terms of flexibility. So you get to put up to 4 in any combination of fighting Pokemon and basic fighting energy from your discard into your hand instead of forcing you to pick 2 and 2. So great addition to fighting. I think all fighting lists are going to be playing this guy over Clara. Our next supporter is Naveen, that reads discard any number of cards from your hand, then draw cards until you have 5 cards in hand. And if this sounds familiar, this is essentially an exact reprint of Sightseer that has seen 0 play in GLC. Comparing this card to other cards that lets you see a maximum of 5 cards, I would much rather play cards like Tate and Liza or even Colress's Experiment that even lost zones your own cards rather than this card. Just not enough gain off of the drawback. Rose's Encouragement is the card that we talked about earlier with the Superior, where you can only play this card if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, but you get to attach up to 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile to one of your Stage 2 Pokemon. Now, I think in almost every single scenario, Reversal Energy is just going to be better, as it gives you 3 energy instead of just 2, and does not take up your supporter for the turn. However, in certain decks where you're attacking with basics and evolutions, playing Reversal Energy can be a little awkward, and you would much prefer to play normal basic energy over that. And so I do see some uses for Roses. I have put up here some the first Stage 2s that came to mind that this would be interesting to play with, especially my Ancient Trait Dragonite that I just want to work so badly, which is super cool. But yeah, I think in almost every case you would just rather play Reversal Energy. Gisant, I think is how you pronounce her name, is a new supporter where you heal 150 damage from one of your Psychic Pokemon. I think this is especially useful in certain typical Psychic strategies that try and go 2 for 1 at the end of the game, with things like Mewtwo that have a Lux Cape attached to it. And you can really tank a hit and then play this and essentially completely take away your opponent's attack. So I think this could be very strong. I think you do have to build around it just a little bit, but can definitely make your attackers live for another turn to keep attacking. And then finally we have Lumio City, which once during each player's turn, they can search their deck for a basic and put it onto your bench. However, your turn ends if you use this. Now, this is the exact same effect on Artisan, except Artisan does not end your turn. So in every single case, you want to be playing Artisan over this. You could play this in control decks that don't really care about attacking in the beginning, or you could play this if you absolutely have to, if you don't own an Artisan, but just play an Artisan. It makes it so you can slightly set up, but just play Artisan. Lastly, we have the new special energy cards. First, we have the Grow Grass Energy that provides a grass energy, and grass Pokemon gets 20 more HP when it's attached. I think this is very useful, very strong to attach to your Stage 2s that you want to keep alive in your grass deck, pushing them just a little bit over that edge of where they can get one-hit KO'd by most things, like Okidogi, Iron Boulder, things like that. So attaching this can just like protect them from a boss and can be very strong. and be the difference from a 1-hit KO to a 2-hit KO. Next we have the Rock Fighting Energy, which for fighting Pokemon, it prevents all effects of attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon done to the Pokemon this is attached to. This does have some useful cases, but I think most of the time for your special energy slot, you are wanting to run a sort of rainbow energy for things like Okidogi and your new Tyrantrum. So it does have its uses, but I think there are better options. Last but certainly the best card in the set is Telepath Psychic Energy. When attached to a Psychic Pokemon, you get to search your deck for 2 basic Psychic Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. So this is a Capture Energy times 2, and it provides a Psychic Energy instead of just colorless for your Psychic Pokemon. I don't think I need to explain how absurd this is, but you can easily search this out with Guzma and Hala, Colress's Tenacity, and Hilda, and I think going forward, all Psychic decks are going to be running these supporters and are going to be playing a couple of special energy in their deck that can even synergize with Necrozma. So, yeah, just an absurd card. Why did we give this to Psychic? Anyways, that's going to do it for the list. Moving on to the type rankings, not very much has changed. Obviously, Psychic and Fighting got even more support, and being the best decks in the format, they are even stronger now. The only change I have made is Dark moving up from C to B tier. I think it has started to find its footing a little bit and is starting to see a little bit more success. But other than that, yeah, things are pretty much the same. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down in the comments if you disagree with anything or if I missed something. And I'll see you in the next one.